What are the favorite ways you've kept Puerto Rican culture in your life while being away from Puerto Rico?
We are fans of the flag. Let me say that, right? So one
I
way,
do know that.
Okay.
Having lived in New York,
Yes. We all know that flag. Hi, everyone. This is Where We Land, a podcast bringing you stories of immigration and multicultural identity. I'm Claudia.
and I'm Luciana. And we're sisters, and we're originally from Peru, but now we live in the U.S.
Today, we got to talk to Noemí Enchautegui de Jesús. Noemi is a Senior Professorial Lecturer in the Department of Psychology at American University in Washington, D.C. She has a PhD in community psychology from NYU, and she's developed and taught a course on the psychology of immigration. We spoke with her about the difficult situations unaccompanied migrant children are exposed to even before they immigrate, all the way up to being reunited with their families.
The whole journey. Such an interesting woman, everything that she's working on. And she was so energetic, so full of life. I really enjoyed this one.
We bonded over that Bad Bunny album. We
Yes,
did.
yes.
We sure did.
Let's get into our conversation.
Let's do it.
Where in the world does your journey start?
wow, my journey. Well, I would say my journey probably started before I was born, when my
yeah.
mom left Puerto Rico, and separately my father left Puerto Rico, and then they met in the Bronx, in South Bronx, in the 60s, and got married in New York and had me, then had my brother, then sent us to live with grandparents in Puerto Rico. They were return migrants, so later they came back. So my journey started in New York, where the parents came from Puerto Rico to New York and then back to Puerto Rico.
Back to Puerto Rico. Okay, okay. And you went to your grandparents' house in Puerto Rico when you were a baby, a kid?
Apparently, I was about 4 years old when
Okay.
that happened.
I love that there's no exact age. We immigrated to the States when we were little kids, and we're like, was I 4? Was I 5? No one's sure.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. For a long, long time, I thought I was 2.5. And then a few years ago, I heard, oh, no, you were close to 4. So I left New York first. The story goes that they wanted my grandparents to meet me because I was the oldest grandchild, the first grandchild. And one auntie had to go visit. So she took me with her to visit Puerto Rico. And my grandma, my mom's mom, told my family, I'm keeping her.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been told.
My mother
Go ahead.
currently tells me, please send me your children and I will return them when they're 18. So I believe that was probably the case. She just wants them so much. And I'm like, Mom, no.
That's not how parenting works, Mom.
Yeah.
But okay.
So I ended up living with my mom's parents.
Okay.
And then a couple of years later, she came, or probably less than 2 years later, she came to live with them too. So everything was stage migration, this concept of stage
Right.
migration. So
Oh, could you
different people-
explain that concept for us, please?
So different family members will do the trip, will do the process of migration at different points. So first, it could be that the family decides one of the parents will go first, and then they'll call or send for another family member. And so
Right.
they will in stages.
I
And
see.
so the return migration, which is what we did, going back migration, because they came back to Puerto Rico to live in Puerto Rico. So that return migration was in stages. So I came first with my grandparents. Then my brother was sent to live with the other set of grandparents in another town
Wow.
of Puerto Rico. And so our grandmothers would get together so that we could spend time together as siblings. And then my mom came. And eventually my father came back.
Oh,
So then we
wow.
were all together again.
That's so curious. I wonder if like the other set of grandparents were like, well, why didn't we get one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. But I've heard, probably they said something like that. You must remember this is the period when it was no phone lines.
Right.
These conversations were happening through letters and, communications through letters.
Wow.
But my mom tells me that my father said after a while of my being with my grandma, if your mom is gonna have her, then we should send Manolito, who is my brother, with my mom. like they needed to make it even.
Wow.
So I don't know if he was anticipating that feeling that she probably wanted to have a grandchild with her too. But the two of us are the oldest grandchildren in both families. And
Okay.
so that's probably why these grandparents wanted to have these little kids with them.
And so, okay, so I'm imagining like a lot of family in Puerto Rico. What was that life like? What was that childhood life like in Puerto Rico?
Yes. Well, it was great. I remember living with the grandparents at first, right? As being it's a place that we all revere in the family. It holds a special place in our hearts. It's an area of my neighborhood where I grew up. This particular neighborhood where I first lived in Puerto Rico, where my mom came from, is called La Cachimba, and it's high up in a mountain. And at the time when I lived there were only 3 families left living there. All the other families had already gone down the mountain to the area that was more populated. And so these 3 houses were still there. That was my first experience living in Puerto Rico. And then when my parents came, it took a little while, but we moved to our house also down the mountain, not up there. Especially because my grandma died. My grandma died when we were living with them. So I was in school in second grade when that happened. So we moved. Yeah, it was too hard for my mom. So the more memories right later are from this other area where there are more people around, more houses. And I didn't tell you about how that part of this La Catimba at the time didn't have water. So we had, there are memories of this very rustic living.
Wow. Yeah.
When we were, so no potable water. So we had to go to a well and get water with like a little creek, get water in different containers to bring back. And
wow.
Yeah, it was very different from New York City.
So growing up in Puerto Rico, what was that image you had of like mainland USA? You had been born there, but what images did you have of it, if any? What was the idea?
My memories when I was really young were of the family together in here because my mom's siblings had all moved to New York, to the Bronx. So for me, that family, the family from Acachimba, is the Bronx family. And they're still in the Bronx in New York. So growing up, it was any trip that I did back to New York was for some event or family gathering. So family gatherings more than really the city.
From all of that, what prompted you to leave Puerto Rico?
So I was in college, and in my senior year of college, one of my psychology professors told me about a new program that was going to allow undergrads to do research. And it would take about a year. And I said, oh, but I'm graduating. Like, it is my senior year. Like, why would I do this?
Right.
I'm graduating. He said, oh, okay. And what are you planning to do? And I said, well, I'm going to do my doctorate right here, right? Like, we are all part of this university that has the doctorate I want to do, which is community psychology. And so she got me to rethink that and think, could this be an opportunity to explore something else? Then give me that opportunity. So she convinced me to give myself that chance to explore. And then open doors to other things. And I ended up coming to the United States, for grad school. But I came to grad school in New York. So I stayed close to home.
Okay. Like,
well, that makes sense.
A familiar place for you. And I mean,
yes.
Also, like one of the best cities in the world. Like, that's amazing that your family was there.
And plenty of great universities.
So I had applied to several places, but at the end, New York was the place that I felt it was going to be safer in terms of a sense of belonging, a sense of the familiar.
I relate to that a lot because when I came here, I moved to the States a couple of years ago now. And when I was deciding where specifically to move to, I did take into account where my sister, Luciana, lives. And I was like, oh, in New York, I'm going to be a train ride away.
Yeah. Also,
Right?
if
It was
you would have,
definitely a
if you would have
factor.
decided like California, I would have been like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" here?"
Yeah, you still family there. What are you doing?
What are you doing? Switching gears a little bit. So obviously New York worked out. You've had a very successful career in psychology. What made you want to pursue that subject?
Community psychology. When I started my college degree in Puerto Rico, I knew I wanted psychology. But when I started college, I realized, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Because I don't think clinical is something, because I didn't know there were areas. I didn't know.
Right.
So I thought everything was clinical.
By clinical, what do you mean?
So seeing patients doing therapy
Right. Okay.
is a clinical area of psychology. Somehow in my head, I thought that was all that psychology was.
Right.
So once I'm in the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras, that was my campus, I learned that there are other fields. And one of these fields was offered at the University of Puerto Rico. A doctorate was offered there called social/community psychology. So what that was, and I'll just describe it in the way of why I felt attracted to it. So maybe that can help convey my interest. In Puerto Rico, at that university in particular, it's a very socially conscious kind of environment. So you're always interested in thinking of social issues, political issues, protesting, all these things. And so the social/community psych area was the field that was very aligned with that, where it's about community development. What are the policies that are needed? What are the forces that influence people's quality of life? What can you do to improve and bring social change? So that's what attracted me to that field, to answer your question, is the idea that it would be an area of psychology where I could be thinking of social issues and what can I do to contribute to the betterment of a community or population, which is still something that attracts me. And I feel that I have been on hold because the idea was to go to Puerto Rico, right? Like get a degree in my mind, get a degree, go back to Puerto Rico and do this work. And I have not done
Life
that because
happened,
I live here.
and you stayed here.
I have stayed here. Exactly.
Can you pinpoint a moment or an event, or what was it that made you change your mind? That made you say, oh no, I actually want to stay here?
You know how life happens and you don't even think it's just happening. Life is happening.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what happened. You meet people, you start, relationships. So it's more of that and a conscious decision. I am staying here. But I had an opportunity to go back to Puerto Rico about 2 years ago with students from the university. And they organized a trip. The students organized a trip. I was there as an advisor. And I had not been to Puerto Rico in 12 years before that trip. So when I went back, it was so impactful. And the kinds of activities we were doing were back to the roots of the things I wanted to do there. And I said, okay, this is it. I need to come back. So now this is the new plan. I'm going back, but I don't have a date yet. But this is the new vision going back.
Very cool. Another part of your work that I want to touch on is you taught a class last year on psychology of immigration. When I read that title for a class, I was so curious. What did that entail?
So that is a topic I've always been interested in, immigration or migration. And because of my own family history, it's always been so interesting to me to understand how people move to another environment, especially an environment that is so different. What is the motivation to do that? So finally, I created a class to try to explore that with students. The actual journey to get to where they want to get to. Then when they get there, how they settle there. So all those steps, right? Trying to look for research to understand what's happening. What kinds of experiences do you have? And that's where we talk about acculturative stressors and all the challenges that people go through trying to adapt, not only what they go through personally, but also how is the new society, that host society, adapting to these newcomers, which we have seen, right, politically, how that how people react. So all of those things are explored in the class.
I'm curious, are there any like big like learnings or discoveries or something that you that you found through that class that you could share?
I feel that I cannot have like one nugget of one thing. I think it's because every step of this process is so deep. The ability to choose and plan is very different from those who have to escape, the refugees, people who are displaced, which is different from the experience I had with my
Right.
family, which I don't know if that's what you were describing with your own experiences, right? Then there's that planning. And so I don't have one nugget other than to say each of those things, it is very meaningful for the people involved in that process. And so it is heartbreaking when you hear people disparage immigrants, which we also try to discuss in class. Where is that coming from? Where is that sentiment coming from? Because to do that, you have to put so much on the line. You decide, I want to do this for my family, for their future. So it's not something that people do lightly.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yes. And it's people who are very hardworking. It takes so much for them to do that.
Very true. You've also done work on the experiences of youth in a similar sense before and after migration. Could you tell us a bit about that?
So that is a project I did with several colleagues at AU, at American University. And we were interested in doing that project because at the time, there were a lot of kids coming through the border between Mexico and the US. I don't know if you remember in the news, a lot of news of these kids called the unaccompanied minors.
Oh, you mean children coming by themselves?
You remember that in the news?
Yeah.
So that motivated us to want to explore this. What is the experience of these kids that are coming? Because our area, the DMV, the district, Maryland, Virginia, was one of the top recipients of these kids that were coming. And so we knew there were a lot of them in this area. So we wanted to see what was the experience. So we set out to find kids that had come and ask them about their experience and also talk to their sponsors. So when those kids came that were unaccompanied, they were placed with a sponsor, a person, an adult who they could have chosen, their parents might have told them to go to, or in many cases, it was their own parents that were already here. And so they are coming because they want to reunite with those family members.
Okay.
So we discovered a lot of the kids ended up being people who had come perhaps with a parent, perhaps with a family member. And so we interviewed that youth person and in the household also the sponsor. Like I said, sometimes the sponsor was a parent. And so one of my colleagues, Ernesto Castañeda, he wrote a book about this data that we collected with these families. It's called Reunited.
Okay.
And it's reunited because part of the theme that we heard from the families and the kids, the young people that we interviewed, is this idea of coming now and reuniting with parents that they have not seen in years.
Wow.
And so that was pretty momentous, right, for them. And there is a lot of work that has to happen for people to reunite. So I'm not talking legal stuff, but social, psychological, emotional things. For a number of these kids, they might have seen a parent when they were little, and then they have not seen them since. They know the parent is right in the United States. And so if both parents are now in the United States, they're coming here to live with these people who are strangers, really, to them.
Right.
Oof.
And not only that, for some of them, the parent has perhaps a new partner. It could be that their parents are not together, so it's this new partner, or it's both parents but new kids that are born in the U.S.
Right.
So now you have mixed status families where someone has citizenship by virtue of birth, but the other kid who came doesn't have that and it's undocumented. So it's a lot of dynamics in these households. And I didn't even mention why some of the kids came. So many of the kids are left with somebody back home while the
Right.
parent is able to work, and then one day they'll send for the child. So for the children who are raised by the grandparents, sometimes the grandma gets sick and may die.
Right.
And so now the kid doesn't have someone and nobody else can take them. And it's time for them to head to the United States.
Oh
This
my
child has to
gosh.
figure things out with somebody to come. And so what they do is that they're not coming solito in the sense that there are other people traveling towards the
Right,
United
right.
States. So now they're joining other people that are
Like a
doing
group of
trips.
people that is moving.
And they may find out about that and they may join that. And of course, there's the coyotes who are the smugglers who charge a bunch of money. But some of the kids at that time, if you remember in the news, it was like so many of them coming together that they could join other groups that were traveling.
Wow.
So many of these kids came because of this sadness of this that had just happened, right? Back home. They had lost their grandma or the person who had been taking care of them. So they come with trauma for many reasons. Trauma of the journey itself. I remember I told you that in the class we covered, how do you get here?
Right.
For some
Yeah.
people, getting here is very traumatic.
I think even just the fact of like your parent immigrated without you
Right.
when you were really little, you might not even have the capacity at that age to understand why they're leaving and that it's not your fault. And that, you know, parents get divorced and kids sometimes are like, why? My parent doesn't love me anymore. That's why they divorced. I mean, any type of like parental separation for long periods of time when you're really young can be a source of trauma.
Right.
Even more so if it's like they went to a different country and then you didn't see them for years.
Right.
So I
The
can't
stories-
imagine.
I know. The stories you're telling yourself, I mean, yeah, who knows?
Right. And perhaps the saving grace is that many families have the same situation. So, you know, when something becomes a little more normative, and so
Right.
that you're not the only household in which this is happening. So that can help sometimes when you have this social comparison with other people, with other families. The other thing is because it's so normative, so many families in that situation, many of them are receiving remittances, like money that families will send from the US back home.
Yeah.
And so there is an understanding that this is the reason this person is not here.
Switching gears a little bit, you've told us your plan is to return to Puerto Rico.
Fingers
What
crossed,
are,
yes.
yeah, that's the vision board. What are the favorite ways you've kept Puerto Rican culture in your life while being away from Puerto Rico?
We are fans of the flag. Let me say that, right? So one way
I do know that.
Okay.
Having lived in New York,
Yes. We all know that flag.
symbols are super helpful and things like music. So over the years, different kinds of music. But if you have been listening to Bad Bunny recently,
yeah.
so that album, the whole album, right, is a way that has brought not just me, but a lot of Puerto Ricans that sense of la patria and what we love and cherish about our country. So food, of course, music, but symbols. In my office and at the university, I have a few things that are traditional art, artesanía from Puerto Rico as well. One of them is a student gifted that a very nice piece with the three kings, the Tres Reyes, which is a very traditional symbol in Puerto Rico as well. So yeah, those kinds of things keep me close.
In that same vein, who makes up your community in the present day? Does it include a lot of Puerto Ricans in DC or other Spanish-speaking groups?
When I came to live in Maryland, I didn't have a lot of connections with other Latinos or Latinas as much, which I had before moving to Maryland. When I lived in Syracuse, we had a very nice community of people from different countries that are Latin American, also African American. Like we had very great networks of those groups. And then 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, we moved to Annapolis in Maryland.
Oh, beautiful.
And so here we have found our people. And so we have a nice community of African American friends that have connections to the Caribbean, connections to the U.S. and Latinos. So I have a very dear friend who is Latina from Puerto Rico, but she was born and raised in New York, but is Puerto Rican, right? And so we are very close. And so she's part of my people here, my community here.
We always like to ask guests what nationalities or cultures they identify with. For us, for example, since we immigrated to the U.S. when we were little and then again as adults, we feel a mix of Peruvian and American. Or when we had a guest recently who was born and raised in the U.S., but would describe herself as Jewish, actually, and would only feel compelled to say that she was American if she were abroad. Like, that's not the first word that she would use to describe herself. So I'm wondering, what is the cultural identity or mix of cultural identities for you?
Puertorriqueña.
Puertorriqueña.
Through and through. Yes, yes. And so I add to that Afro-Puerto Rican or Afro-Boricua or Black Puerto Rican. So to sort of emphasize that aspect too, because sometimes we forget the sort of racialization that happens, right, with different Latinos and Latinas. So we have different ancestries and probably all of us may have the same ancestries, but they don't show, right? It's not visible. And so in terms of the visibility, so like my blackness is part of what I feel is part of me too. So Puerto Riqueña, yeah. Boricua, Puerto Rican, Puerto Riqueña. Yes.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. And lastly, we have a segment called Speak My Language, where we like to ask the guest if there's like a word or phrase that either doesn't exist in English, doesn't have an equivalent, or just something that you think sounds better in Spanish, you know? Do you have a word or phrase like that? Does anything come to mind?
Well, speaking of identity and nationality, in my psychology of immigration class, I told them about this word I love, which is patria. And I feel that when we try to convey that sentiment of patria in English, I don't think it's the same. I don't feel there is an equivalent to the word patria. And so we may say homeland and things like that, but I don't feel it's conveying the same emotionality, I think, that patria. Okay, so I would say patria is my favorite word that is.
Because patria, the direct translation of patria is homeland. But you're right, homeland sounds very like technical or almost like, you know, like it sounds like a dictionary definition of something.
Patria is much more emotional. Much more emotional.
So I'd recommend a song by Rubén Blades.
Oh.
About patria.
Love Rubén Blades.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So when you have a chance, find this song, Patria. And
I gotta say, like, with the music, you guys are just like...
You're killing it.
So
Puerto Rico is killing it.
I have to tell you, my husband and I were in Puerto Rico February 2020, right before the pandemic. It was like our last pandemic.
Wow.
And I saw the whole time I was like, vamos pa la playa. And I was just like... and I had to ask, like, what is chinchorra? Like, I had to ask about, and they were like, oh, yeah, and they're like bar hopping, basically. And I was like,
it could be food too, because they're trying to promote the food aspect too, so that people can try food in Brazil.
I had a medalla, though. It made everything in that song made so much more sense. Beautiful place, beautiful food.
Thank you.
Just like really lovely. We had such a wonderful time.
Thank you. I hope I can one day go to Peru as well. I've heard it's beautiful.
Oh my gosh, yes.
If you do, shoot us an email, shoot us a text. We will drop the recommendations.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. And as you said, you feel like you're from both places, so you can definitely talk about what's good in Peru and what's good in the U.S. too. I guess you're part of that 1.5 generation. Have you heard of those? The 1.5. So the 1.5 is that those immigrants that come as children.
Yeah,
So
that would be us.
They're not like their adult counterparts who come as adults and they're fully formed, basically, but they're not the second generation either who was born here. So they're between. So they call it 1.5.
One
It
and a
sounds like you
half.
have 1.5 generation feelings and identity.
Look at that. We have a
Look at
name
that.
for us.
Maybe that should have been the podcast, 1.5.
1.5 sisters, and then people would have been confused. I count two. I count two.
Who's the half?
Yeah.
So, now that we've wrapped up the conversation, what did you think?
I found this conversation very interesting. First of all, just her work on unaccompanied minors,
Oh my gosh.
unaccompanied migrant youth.
The same thing stuck with both of us, I think.
Yes, it was so interesting because I think you're always hearing about the focus being on the immigrant, right? Like the one parent that travels and has to sacrifice so much and leave their family behind just to send them back money.
Yeah.
But that is a well-worn story that a lot of immigrants know. But then when that focus on the child that gets left behind and has to spend all those years without a parent, and then eventually has to make that journey all by themselves to reunite.
That
was very eye-opening.
Yeah, I mean, same. I was fascinated by the people. Like, who are these people that are doing first of all, that are doing the work to like get these kids reunited with a relative.
Right.
And then keeping tabs on like how they're, just doing in this new reality, in this new family dynamic, in this new country.
Yeah, checking in on them year after year.
On them. Like, obviously, like there's so much trauma that these kids have to overcome. The journey alone, like to get to the U.S., that actual journey, like if it's by plane or is it by the border or is it who's accompanying you if you're alone? Oh my God, that experience.
She mentioned that a lot of kids, like groups of kids would do it together.
Yeah, so that is one huge bit of it, but also that huge chunk of reconciling the life that you had with this new life with your parent now here in this new country where you don't know the language. It looks very different. And at such a vulnerable age, which is like childhood, you're still developing so many other things. I'm just so curious about who are these people? Who are these? We've talked about sponsor families. Who are these sponsor families? Who are these people doing the Lord's work? And if you are listening to this, we'd love to talk to you. Please reach out. We would love to interview you and hear more about your work. That part is just a whole other side of the coin that I'm so interested in.
Yeah, we for sure need to dig deeper and dive more into that world. Also, the other thing that stood out to me was just her love of the new Bad Bunny album.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you could tell it brought Noemi great joy in her life. Well, she's just such a proud, like, Boricua, right?
Yeah.
But even beyond that, like, I think that album is very nostalgic for most Latin Americans, just because in Latin America, we all grew up sharing each other's culture. Like, we all listened to salsa and bachata and reggaeton, and we all listened to artists and music from each other's countries.
Yeah.
Like, we all listened to Shakira when we were growing up in the 90s.
Carlos Vives, Juan Luis Guerra. Like,
exactly.
Everyone will know who those artists are.
Exactly. So the fact that he took these different, like, he takes salsa and he takes like bachata and dembow and all these like different genres of music that are so nostalgic to all Latin Americans and infuses them into his album and makes modern music with them. It's just very nostalgic for everyone. Like, any Latin American can listen to that album and be like, oh, this feels like home.
Yeah. For sure. And I think that we all get equally excited when one of these artists gets like a worldwide recognition, because it just kind of makes us feel like we all made it. We all kind of made it. Like Shakira winning the Grammy this year was like, yes,
Yeah.
She's from Colombia, I'm from Peru, but I'm also rooting for her because she is like such a badass. But also like, yes, someone else made it.
Always rooting for anyone remotely Latin American.
Yes. Yeah.
You have a shade. Your father kind of was from Guatemala once upon a time. Great. I'm rooting for you.
Yeah, exactly.
That wraps it up for us today. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and check us out on Instagram at Where We Land Pod. Hasta la vista, babies.
Ciao, ciao. At Where We Land, we know some immigrant experiences are harder than others, especially for those in the margins of our current legal system. If you would like to help, we encourage you to support organizations that provide services for immigrants and champion their rights. You can find a list of those organizations in the show notes.